Guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
Okay, we're here with Hasselhobbs. Going to do one of my grilled interviews. So the obvious place to start with Hasselhobbs in his career is in Warcraft 3. And I'm not going to go too deep into Warcraft 3 here, but I want to ask some questions to kind of contrast against your StarCraft 2 career later and kind of find out some of the interesting differences in the games, because obviously some players have played both now. So the first place I want to start off is just your career in Warcraft 3. Like, the little I know is that you were basically... I mean, when we think of German players in Warcraft 3, it was mainly about EPS. Like, there weren't too many huge results outside of EPS as far as I remember for German players. Yeah. So in EPS, you were pretty successful. You won a few titles, got to the final a few times. How would you categorize your Warcraft 3 career? Like, which players were in your peer group in terms of results? Like, who were you good, better than, worse than?
Yeah, you're right about the German players never really had success on the international scene, unless from some small victories in some clan war leagues or maybe a best of 3 somewhere, but nothing really too big. So I won 3 titles in the EPS, 3 times the German championship. And then there was Xlord. I think he was a little bit better than me. But all other players, I think, were at least a little bit below my skill. So Xlord and I were the best Germans in Warcraft 3 in the end. And we were able to compete with most of the European players, I think. Not the very best, like Grubby, Todd, Happy, Creo, and I think Sase. And there were a few more which were definitely better than us, but all the other Europeans we were able to compete with. So yeah, that was my skill level back there. I think in StarCraft 2 I'm much better, to be honest. And I don't even know why that really happened. Because I think my practice schedule is kind of the same, but in Warcraft 3 I was never really able to get cross a certain line, because my skill level was pretty much always the same, I think.
Actually, that's an interesting topic to go into then, because one of the interesting things about the StarCraft 2 scene is that a lot of the best Europeans in StarCraft 2 were Warcraft 3 players, but funnily enough, a lot of the best ones in StarCraft 2 actually weren't that good in Warcraft 3, or rather they didn't have big results. And a lot of them were quite young at the time, so Stefano, Naniwa, Sase, these guys didn't have the same results as a Grubby, Moon, etc. Yeah. But they were also quite young. So what I want to know is, thinking of what you've seen from them in StarCraft 2 now, your own transition to StarCraft 2, if Warcraft 3 had just continued and StarCraft 2 never came out, would they naturally have become top players anyway? What's your sense?
It's a good question. It's really hard to answer. I think the answer is no. I don't think that Sase or Naniwa would be as successful as they are in StarCraft 2. And same for me. And
why do you say that though? What's coming to mind when you think of it?
I think in the end of Warcraft 3 there were a certain amount of players, 15 or 20, and they were always invited to tournaments, and they were by far the very best. It was really hard to reach that level. And I think it was also very hard to find really good practice in the end of Warcraft 3, so it was hard to become better. And it seemed like that those 15 players, or I don't know, maybe a bit more, they just had a different level. They were one level above all the other players, and somehow it was really hard to get into that kind of level. I think the only player who really managed to do that was Lucifron in the end. Mm-hmm. Lucifron was an underdog for a really long time, and then he started to win tournaments and actually compete with the very best. But I think he was really the only guy who managed to do that in the last 2 years of Warcraft 3. All the other players been there for several years and always been successful. So yeah. And in StarCraft 2 it was a very fresh game. Everything was new. You had to learn new skills, because it plays different than Warcraft 3, but also very different from Brood War. The unit movement and the micro is different and stuff like that. So everyone had to learn it new. So I think everyone started with basically in 0. And then you have to adapt very quickly to the game. You have to learn new strategies, timings, and it seems like that because of many new players, there was a lot of just fresh players, new ideas, new strategies that seem to be very important for the RTS scene overall. And now we see some old players doing really well, and some of the others really never managed to do that well. They just fall apart. So they couldn't really transition to the game too well.
Okay, speaking of Lucifron then, I mean, it's good timing to talk about him, really, because people talk now about patch Zergs, etc., and that's basically kind of what people tried to imply about Lucifron when he came around, calling a lucky Fron, saying, oh, he just plays Orc, that's why he had these wins. Like, what do you think of him actually as a player now that you've seen him have success in StarCraft 2 and he's like becoming one of the top Europeans here? What do you think of him in Warcraft 3 and now?
Yeah, in Warcraft 3 there was always the term of a patched Orc, and now it's the patched Zerg, and well, Lucifron is Terran in StarCraft 2, so you can call him something like that. And I think he's a very, very talented player. I also think that lately he practiced quite a lot. I think one of the barcode accounts on Europe with very good stats is Lucifron. So he seems to play quite a lot of ladder, and he did very well in some tournaments lately. And in Warcraft 3, pretty much the same story. I think he was just one of the finest European players, very talented and very smart about the game as well. Maybe Orc helped him a little bit when he started to become good, but overall you have to say he was just a very good player who was able to understand the game at a very high level. And when he transitioned in the early stage of StarCraft 2, he didn't do too well. I think he won Go for StarCraft 2 or something. Back then it was a big tournament, yeah. But then he disappeared for a while, and then he came back by winning the Gathering, I think. And then he did really well at the WCS, like European finals, and some other big tournaments, together with his brother. I think it is really good for them to practice against each other. They can talk so much about the game, which should be very, very helpful, especially in TVZ and ZVT. Yeah. So, Lucifron, I have to say, is just a very smart and good player. There's nothing else to add, I think.
I mean, you kind of mentioned there, one of the problems with trying to break into Warcraft 3 was, first of all, there's this famous thing of like the invite-only sort of lockout almost, where it was kind of implied that if a player was famous enough, even if he kind of wasn't that into the game anymore, he'd still maybe get an invite over some guy who was just slaving away trying to get in, but he doesn't have a big enough name yet. You also mentioned it's very hard to get practice towards the end. I even heard players like Grobby in the last few years say like it was hard for them to get anyone to practice against. So what I want to know is, for people who are on the outside looking in at StarCraft 2, contrast it to like how easy is it, for example, for like a young player who has no name to just like come up if he's good in StarCraft 2 in comparison? Like what are the advantages and what else is there here?
I think the biggest advantage in StarCraft 2 is that there are so many tournaments. Like there are so many online tournaments and online tournaments where you qualify for offline events. And in Warcraft 3 we maybe had 2 big tournaments every 3 months. And now we have like 3 big tournaments per month in StarCraft 2, and like almost every day an online tournament. So if you are one of the upcoming players and if you are really good, you're gonna play those online cups and you're gonna start to win, and then people will start to recognize you. Probably at first only smaller teams, and then they will pick you up. You're gonna play more team leagues. You continue to play online tournaments, and then there's like something like the IEM, where everyone can play it. It's not invite only, so everyone has a chance to qualify. So I think once you've done that, everyone, you're gonna be recognized by every good player and by the good teams. And from there on, it's kind of easy to get a good team. Of course, you need good results, but if you qualify for IEM, most of the time you're gonna have good results. So I think really in StarCraft 2, the big amount of tournaments and just the huge community. The community is so much bigger as well, so there's just more streams you can watch, and also every player can stream their own games. And if you're really good, people are gonna tune in, and if you're really good and you're gonna add some entertainment by, I don't know, saying funny things, even more people will tune in. So that's the differences from Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2. And in Warcraft 3 was just very hard to break into the scene because it was only a couple of players, and then, as you said, it was mostly invite only. There were only a few tournaments like WCG and ESWC where everyone could qualify. Apart from that, it was like 80% invite only, so it was really hard to get there.
Do you think another factor that allowed this hegemony of these top players to just always stay on top was the fact that, from what I've heard in Warcraft 3, there was a point where you almost never got new maps. It was like the same maps for years and years and years. And so people complain now about certain maps lasting too long in GSL or whatever. But I mean, how was it in comparison to now?
Yeah, that's true. In Warcraft 3, we played Turtle Rock and Twisted Meadows for like 5 years or 6 years, I think. And you can imagine how boring the games sometimes develop, because it's gonna be always the same. I mean, there was the creeping where you get the items, and the items were random dropped. So there was always it was a little bit different, but still, like the creeping patterns and stuff like that was always the same, and like the army movement was very similar every game. So it was all about micro and the tense. Like the fights were really cool to watch. If both players are almost the same level, it was very nice to watch the fights. But everything else was, I'd say, kind of easy to learn, because there were only like 2 or 3 strategies per race, per map, and then the maps never really changed, so you didn't have to adapt to anything, you just copied the good players. And in StarCraft 2, lately there are not too many new maps, but I think the last 3 months or something we didn't really get too many new maps. Just now the Koreans started to get new maps in the OZL, but they've been not played in Europe so far. Like Whirlwind and Abyssal City maybe are the newest additions to the European map pools. But overall I can't really complain, because before that we got new maps every like 2 months or something, and the old maps were kicked out if they were too imbalanced or too boring to watch. And I think right now in Wings of Liberty, or it's just before Heart of the Swarm, it's not too far away anymore, and with Heart of the Swarm there are going to be new maps, new units, so there are going to be new strategies and new ideas about map design as well, I think, because if you implement new units, you can change the maps a little bit according to the units. So I'm not really too scared that it's going to be too boring with the maps. Yeah.
One of the things people always lauded Brood Wars being this awesome game for was, like, in theory, how versatile it was. There was a lot of options that people had at all times. In StarCraft 2, people complain like people are too abusive. They just there's a few things at each time in the meta game. It's when that's like, you know what the 2 players are going to do sort of after a certain point. Contrasting this to Warcraft 3, is it a fault of the maps that the game got so sort of figured out? Like when I had tried to get people who played Warcraft 3 heavily to explain to me, okay, what was so good about it, what was so unique? Some of even the best players kind of make out as though towards the end, like, everyone kind of knew what was going to happen. Like, you knew even which area to creep to get the better item drops. You knew, like, it's going to be this fight versus this one, just micro these particular. Like, what do you think of this?
That's actually very true. In Warcraft 3 you knew exactly how the game will go, unless someone was playing very crazy, but that really didn't happen too much in the end, because it would just not work out. So it was all about the fights and the micro there, and maybe the item drops as well. And in StarCraft 2 right now, on some maps at least, we can have the same situation. On Daybreak, for example, it's gonna be always, or like 80% of the game is gonna be a macro game, especially in PvZ, where the Zerg will have a lot of spine crawlers, Infestor, Broodlord, and the Protoss tries to get his army composition out and is hoping for a good Vortex or for a really effective carrier switch, which is, I think, very boring to watch. There's no question about it. It is very, very boring to play as well. Don't get me wrong, I would play different if it's possible, but at one point it's almost impossible to attack, because the defending advantage is so big in StarCraft 2, and especially with the Xel'Naga towers on Daybreak, you will see so much of the map that you can always see the army size of your opponent and the composition when he's trying to attack, so you can always adapt very quickly. As Protoss you can warp in, or Zerg you have a lot of lava, so you can react right away. In Terran, well, that works a bit different, but most of the time they're gonna have a lot of starports in the end as well, so they can react to what they see. And I think that's a problem of the maps, to be honest. I don't think the balance... I mean, there are some problems with a few units, but overall I think it's about the maps, that they don't have enough attack paths. Like on Daybreak there's like the middle path, and then there's 2 more where you're gonna go over the expanse, and that's it. And the Xel'Naga tower will actually cover almost all 3 of them, which I think that is the biggest problem right now in the late game. I think if there would be more possibilities to walk around with your army, like more space in general, then the game would become more faster in the late game as well. Just you don't have to stay around, because you can walk across the map. Like on Whirlwind, for example, if it's cross spawn, then it will be a very long macro game, but it's gonna be much more about denying expansions and running around, at least as a Protoss, because your army is gonna be faster than Infestor Broodlord. So yeah, I think with new maps and maybe even some changes like trying to get rid of the Xel'Naga Tower or changing the Xel'Naga Tower by having it less vision would be helpful in the late game. And also small balance changes, but I think Blizzard will not really change too much in Wings of Liberty anymore because they are waiting for Heart of the Swarm. So yeah, we have to wait and find out in Heart of the Swarm how exactly it will be in the late game, because I think the early and mid game in StarCraft 2 is still very nice to watch, and some matchups are like TVZ. I think is very nice to watch all the time. Like there are many drops. There's a lot of speed in the matchup because the Zerg has Zerglings and he's going for counter attacks, and yeah, the Terran has drops and Marines are pretty quick as well, and you can build them and you can get rid of them pretty easy as well, and effective of course. So yeah, I think it's about the maps and small balance issues in Wings of Liberty, like Broodlord Infestor is boring to play, boring to watch. Then the Vortex mechanic is pretty much the same, but then Zerg can parasite the mothership, which is pretty crazy, I think, that this is even possible. Yeah, because it would ruin the game within 1 second. The same for Vortex though, like the Vortex, if it hits all Broodlords, the game is ruined within 1 second. And in TVZ you don't have the same situation. There's like Vikings, Ravens, Thors against Zergling, Infestor, Broodlord or something. And there's not this point where everything just dies within 1 second. It takes a bit longer, and you can rebuild, and you can rebuild units which actually make sense. Yeah, so I hope that it will change a bit in Heart of the Swarm.
Another interesting way I thought we could contrast the 3 games to kind of go to your expertise in Warcraft 3 and see how it applies to StarCraft 2 is that one of the big things that people always say was so great about Brood War is that since Blizzard stopped updating the game in like 2001 or something, you had all these years where you could never look to Blizzard like, oh, help us. Like if your race was underpowered or there was some problems, you had to just figure out a way to solve it. So people always hold that up as the example. Like, you know, they did figure out and like Protoss overcame Zerg eventually. Like a lot of things did work out. But then if we use the example of Warcraft 3 to contrast against that, from what I've heard and talked to people, it sounds like there was a point in the game where suddenly Orcs were like winning nearly all the tournaments. And you were an Undead player, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so just to mention that, to put in some context here for what you're about to say, I heard there was also periods where like Undead especially, it was like almost impossible to win against the best Orcs in like big tournaments. Like what do you think of this like should Blizzard intervene regularly? Is there a degree of letting the players figure things out? And then how did it relate to Warcraft 3 in this sense?
Blizzard did wait way too long in Warcraft 3 to address those imbalances, I'd say. They changed it, I don't know, I think 1 year ago, where they changed the Ensnare of the Raider and the Blade Master's Windwalk, I think. They nerfed it a little bit. And now the Undead won the last WCG, yeah. So it seems like it helped. But that change needed to be like, I don't know, 2 years before Warcraft 3 was dead or something, because at that point it started to become really bad for Undead and really good for Orc. And well, Night of Human had a chance against Orc, but overall there were like a lot of tournament wins by Orcs. It's maybe also a reason because maybe they were the best players as well, like Lyn, Grubby, Fly, Lucifron, they were like extremely good as well, and the Undead stopped playing, most of them retired, and then for Night Elf it was maybe Moon, I can't really remind, I think was very strong as well, and the humans, the Chinese players like Infi Sky and TH were extremely good. But yeah, for Undead there was almost no player left. I think the last really good Undead was Happy, the Russian player, and it was so unfortunate for him in tournaments. Like he made it to the semifinals, then he lost to the first Orc, and then in the third place decider he met another Orc, and then he became fourth, and there was no prize money for the fourth. I think it happened like 2 times at WCG or something, which is very depressing, I think. So yeah, that was definitely a mistake that Blizzard didn't do anything for that long. And in StarCraft 2, I think they are addressing the issues pretty quick. I mean, Broodlord and Festa been very annoying to play for like 5 months, I think, or 6, or yeah, something around that. And now they finally changed it a little bit. They nerfed the fungal by 1 range, which helps a bit, but I don't think it's like really a game changer. We still see the same games in the late game, which is not the problem of. I think it's not the issue of Broodlord and Festa, but it's the problem for, especially for Protoss, to have units which really can engage this kind of army. Because if you get the perfect vortex, you're gonna win, and if not, you have to jump in with your stalkers. But stalkers are kind of weak. They will die pretty quickly to Zergling, Infested Terrans, and Broodlords if the composition is right. And the Archons actually can't reach this army unless you have a vortex, because they are kind of like melee units, and Broodlords have so much range, and the Broodlings will block the whole path. So yeah. It's more about like giving Protoss a new unit, and that's what they do in Heart of the Swarm with the Tempest. Like you have a high range unit which can engage, which can start to engage the fights without suiciding your whole army, or like without having this. It either works or it doesn't work, because the Tempest is high range, so you can start to fight without losing everything, which should be good for the balance. I think I didn't really play HOTS too much so far, because Blizzard is still changing the whole game like every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So yeah, I can't really criticize Blizzard too much, because overall in StarCraft 2 the balance is pretty good, I have to say. I mean, the first year was very dominated by Terrans, and since then there was a period where Protoss won a lot, and now it's Zerg. So all 3 races had a period where they won a lot. But overall we still see very nice games, and I think it's pretty good balance, to be honest. But there are some issues, definitely.
So talking about balance and linking to Warcraft 3 again, an idea I just had was, so you mentioned Grubby there. When Orc was like, I think it was when they were just starting to win everything, or when they'd just been winning for a while, Grubby wrote this article sort of saying like, you should never complain about balance. He was an Orc player, by the way, for everyone watching this. You shouldn't complain about balance, you should just sort of play the game, and there's sometimes the race is more favoured. He had all these reasons as to why you shouldn't complain about balance, which is kind of ironic, because I think he actually complained beforehand about balance. But anyway, that aside, the interesting thing about StarCraft 2 is, like you said, in the early days, Terran was just dominating, especially in Korea. It was like everyone was Terran almost. Well, the funny thing is, people used to have this rationalization. They used to say, well, you see, what happens is all the best players play Terran. It's just coincidence. And, they just practice more, and they're smarter. Well, the funny thing is, magically, a year and a half later, people say the same thing about Zerg. No, the Zergs are just practicing a lot more, these new Zergs that have come up. The best players in Europe just happen to play Zerg. Like, what do you think of this argument here? Is there a case to be made that there was balance problems in both periods?
I don't think that like the Terrans practiced more back then. It was definitely it is not like it's super imbalanced. It's just like on the very high level of gaming, like the slight imbalance will change a lot, because especially if you're aware of how to exploit such things. And back then, I remember like in the very early days of StarCraft 2, the Nexus had it had less hit points, I don't know exactly the number, but back then, like there were always medevac drops, killing the Nexus right away, and then they were retreating without losing anything, which was a huge issue back then. But luckily Blizzard reacted pretty quickly, buffing the Nexus. But of course, in that period, Terrans won a lot of tournaments by doing that. I remember, I think Show won one of the IEMs in Kiev. Yeah, with exactly that things, like playing 1-1-1 and a lot of medevac usage, because medevacs back then had quicker, I think they were flying a bit quicker or something like that. There was a nerf at some point, which is a while ago. And in Korea, as you mentioned, the GSL was like 4 Terrans in the semi-finals for like 3 seasons or even longer. So yeah, I don't think that it was the players. I mean, they were really good, and they are really good right now. But if you're aware of that and you're a smart player, you're gonna just exploit those issues. And right now, I mean, the new Zerg players, like Snoot in Europe, for example, because you just mentioned the European Zergs, and Vortex, and who else is there? Xlord just won against MMA. Stefano, of course, is a very, very strong player. And Stefano is a really good example, because I think he's super smart about the game. And there was a period where he basically never lost against Protoss because he understood exactly what to do, which makes it extremely difficult for difficult for Protoss to win against Zerg. And at that point, Stefano was basically the only Zerg without like having problems against Protoss. And he in interviews he always said, yeah, playing against Protoss is easy. But all other Zergs were complaining a lot. And at one point they started to figure out that copying his style is pretty effective. And now we have the state where a lot of Zergs doing well against Protoss, unless you meet Parting, because Parting still wins every PvZ. I don't know how. And but yeah, almost every other Protoss struggle against Zerg. And for Terran, I think, I mean, sometimes they complain about Bulldog and Festa as well, but Blizzard just changed the Raven a bit. Like you don't have to upgrade the Seeker missile anymore, which makes it a little bit better, and which gives the Terran the hint to use Raven a bit more, because I think Raven is a really good tool in the late game for the Terrans to break the Broodlord and Festa army. And yeah, and also they nerfed the Infested Terrans. I just remember that. So Storm is more effective for Protoss. Yeah, the X. And they also share HP. Like when you hit the egg and it will hatch to the Infested Terran also took the damage, which is it is actually very helpful in all matchups, I think. Also in ZVZ, because sometimes in ZVZ you see Infestor against Infestor and they're gonna throw a lot of X. So if you funnel the X now, it's gonna deal damage to the Infested Terrans as well, which is definitely a good point. Well, I was talking so much. What was the question, by the way?
Yeah.
How do we start it? If the players were, I think if the players were just better or practicing more, yeah, I think that is not the reason. I think obviously everyone is practicing a lot most of the time, and as I said, if they are smart and if they are aware of some small like balance issues and if they can exploit it, it will work out really well, because on the highest level the small things always matter a lot.
So is it too much of an exaggeration to say then that, well, I mean, if we just use the same example again, so the period when Terran was on top and the period when Zerg is on top, if we look at the period when Terran was on top, if you were to beat the absolute top tier Terrans, you almost had to be like a genius level Zerg player, it seems. You had to be like a Nesty or a Dongre Gu. You had to be like insanely good just to beat the other people who might even be a little notch below you on Terran. Now, if we look in reverse, it seems to almost be the same. Like you have to be some super high level Korean Terran to be like the best Zergs, or even like the just below the best Zergs almost. Is this like an exaggeration, or do you think it's true?
I think it's true, and I think it's because against Zerg, especially Infestors, very small mistakes will cost you the game. If your army is clumped for a second and you get funneled, then you can't retreat anymore. Unless the Zerg screws up and can't chain funnel you, your army is gonna die. Like no matter what you do, because you can't retreat. You're gonna get the second funnel will hit and the third, and then everything is dead. And that's definitely a problem in the game, I think. But it's the same for force field, by the way. If you play Immortal all in and you have some really good force field usage, then the Zerg army will just die without really being able to engage into the fight, which is also a problem. But overall, I think funnel is easier to use because it has a bigger radius and it's like point and click. You're gonna click on the units and then they're gonna get funneled. So it's also, I think, very difficult to change this things for Blizzard. Like they have a few ideas, but then when you see like the balance changes in Heart of the Swarm, like they made funnel a projectile and they lowered the range, and now the range is on 10 again, and the projectile is like super fast, which makes me almost feeling like, okay, it's basically the same spell as in Wings of Liberty, but having more range, which is the opposite from what you want to have, I think. So it seems like some units are just very hard to address and to balance them well. Like the Sentry or the Force Field itself was never really touched, unless like, I think one change where massive units could broke the Force Field. But apart from that, they never really touched Force Field, like the duration, the energy cost, or something else. So it feels like they don't really know, like they want to keep it in the game, but they don't really know how to make it, like more fun to watch, or like less game deciding. I think that would be cool to have, like more like other spells which are not that game deciding, like Vortex, Fungal, Force Field maybe. The EMP Storm, for example, was balanced out very nice. There used to be a time where it was very annoying to watch because it was it was all about EMP and Storm, because back then the players clumped up their army so much. But that changed in PvT. Like the PvT you're gonna see nowadays is very nice to watch. I think it's a very cool where you have like High Templars all around the map, a lot of observers. The Terran will use a lot of scans to get good engagements, good EMPs and snipes. Gonna try to kill the observers, then using cloak, stuff like that. So that really worked out as Blizzard planned, I think. They had to nerf EMP a little bit by reducing the radius, and since then it became a really good matchup, I think. And for the other, PvZ, I think is still they need to do some work. And I think the mirror matches, like TVT, seems to be very nice. It's really hard for the players to lose, to die, because siege tanks are so good defensive. And in PvP, small mistakes actually can cost you the game right away, but it's the same for ZVZ, like Zergling, Baneling, or a good funnel on the ramp where the roaches are all trapped. Things like that should be less of a factor, I think, in StarCraft 2. Then it would be much more enjoyable to play and to watch if you don't have like this one moment where everything just falls apart because of a spell, which is not beautiful to watch.
An interesting thing that the American Terran player QXC told me in an interview at the beginning of 2012, when I was asking him about balance issues, like I made the same point there, like early on so many of the players were Terran and they were winning all the titles, so does that mean that Terran was imbalanced in some sense? He said that he thinks it's more that of the potential of the three races, Terran reached its potential much earlier, or was more figured out to some degree early on. So that was his theory as to why so many players were doing very well in it. And so if we look at now in the Zerg era, could you make the case that one of the problems is the fact that, well, the Zergs will complain we don't have a lot of options as to what we can do. We have to sort of go Infestor and these sorts of builds. But as a result, it almost sort of funnels players who wouldn't be that good if you had a lot of options. They might pick the wrong ones down like sort of the right one. Like everyone knows, so this is kind of the way you're supposed to play it. Do you think that's a factor in why, let's say, mediocre Zergs can have better results than perhaps they should?
I think so. I think basically the game plan for Zerg most of the times is reaching the point where you have enough Infestors, and then you can always take a good fight, or trading energy for army. And before that, of course, you have to be a good player to understand when your opponent is going for all-in or some kind of cheese, so you'll be able to defend that. But once you reach that level, I think the game plan is pretty similar for... It doesn't matter if you're gonna be Linog or X-Lord or Hanfi or any other Zerg, because the game plan is pretty similar. But it's also, I think, for Terran and Protoss it's pretty similar. Just the thing that Fungal is... I think especially the Infestor just doesn't allow any mistakes by your opponent. Like, as I said, one Fungal can ruin the game. But overall in StarCraft 2, the builds right now, like Terran, always, like if they open up one Rex CC, you always will see the push with 2 medivacs at the 10-minute mark. Like they will not change it. It's just a good build. That's why they always do it. And for Protoss, like Forge Expand against Zerg, and then you have different options. And if you choose one of the options, you're always going to see the same layout of the build, because it's just the best thing to do from there. And same for Zerg, I think. So that's how RTS games go, I think. Once you figured out what is the best option, you're gonna go for it because you want to win, and you can't blame anyone for doing that. And of course, the players who are not that good gonna copy the good players. And I think if you play enough and you copy the build very well and you get enough experience, like how to react against certain things, you will become a good player. And then I think I can't blame that anymore for like using that kind of strategy because everyone does it anyway. So I think you have to copy those kind of builds, and then you need a lot of experience, so you become better, and at one point you will just be able to compete with the best if you have the talent to do so.
So to talk about Protoss now, To kick it off, a man whose opinions we both happen to enjoy, Nightend, told me in an interview that, I mean, he made a kind of a crazy statement. He said 30 to 40% of players who play Protoss who are at the top don't deserve to be there, because he thinks that Protoss to some degree is sort of skill capped because it doesn't require so much micro in comparison to, say, Terran. And so he says that as a result, if he feels he's better than a player, sometimes it's like there's no avenue for him to show that he's necessarily better than that player with other Protoss players, and I'm guessing with other players at Zerg as well, I'm guessing he's suggesting. Is this a problem with Protoss? Is it limited in that sense?
I think Terran is. I think Protoss is different to play. I don't know if it's really limited, but like the way Protoss is designed, you're gonna clump up your units most of the time. You're gonna have this one army, and it's very army centric. Like you always need to be aware of your army for good force fields and good storms. That is very important. While Terran, they have drops. And of course, at one point they need to be very careful of the Ghost for good EMPs and snipes, but before that, they can run around the map because they can always escape with Stimpack and Medivacs because they can load in and fly away. For Protoss, the units are kind of slow, so it's really hard to retreat if you run around. So you're gonna sit and build your army, and then at one point, if the timing is correct, you're gonna push and kill your opponent, or you're gonna go for a like really long game in the macro game. So I think, I don't know if Nightend is really right about that. Because if you see MC playing and Nightend, you can definitely see a difference. And same for, maybe even if you see Rain and MC, I think you see the difference of those two players in the skill. So
is Rain more skilled than MC in your opinion?
Lately, I think yes. Lately, I think Rain is probably the best Protoss.
In what sense? What do you think of him?
I think he understands StarCraft 2. I think his understanding of StarCraft 2 is just a little bit better than anyone else as a Protoss player. Like he uses builds which no one else does, and which actually means that he invented them. Like, and they are very clean as well. And it's very, at least for me, it's very hard to copy some of his builds because it requires a lot of multitask. Like you're gonna have the War Prism on the map, you're gonna harass, and at the same time you don't do any kind of mistakes in your macro game, which actually requires a lot of skill. And MC most of the time, especially when he won a lot of tournaments, was very, very timing based. There were so many famous 2-base all-ins of MC, and that was the way how Protoss gonna win, so you can't blame him for that. But that's just a totally different approach of the game, I think, when you see those two playing. And recently MC is not winning too much anymore. He lost to Grubby at the IEM in Singapore, and I think there was one more foreign tournament where he dropped out kinda early, which didn't happen before. So yeah, to be honest, I think you can see the difference by the Protoss players in the skill as well. So I wouldn't really agree on that statement.
Okay, another Protoss player, Zoka, he told me that an interesting thing he says, he claims that actually the Protoss Death Ball, which is still much vaunted today, people mention it all the time, oh, if the Protoss just gets to the Death Ball, it's an automatic win, how do you stop it? But he tells me he thinks that's been a myth for like a year. Like he says maybe there was a time when that was the case, maybe in PvT, but he says now in PvT, supposedly the matchup where Protoss should have the best chance, maybe when you both max out, initially you have a bit of an advantage, but if you wait any longer than that, he says actually then like Terran gets more the advantage. Is there anything to this?
I actually don't agree against Terran with that statement, because I think in the very late game Protoss has a slight advantage against Terran. But I have to agree that the term Protoss Death Ball is not accurate anymore. I think there used to be a time where it was true, when no one really figured out the game, and then they just died to all the lasers, the Void Rays, Colossus, and Stalkers. But nowadays it's just different. So that doesn't really make sense to call it the Death Ball anymore, because it doesn't kill everything. And I don't know. I think against Terran, in the very late game, if there is a fight and the trade is kind of even, where both gonna lose their army, and the Protoss has 40 warp gates, he will be able to replenish his army quicker than the Terran. So I think that's a slight advantage of a Protoss. But if the Terran gets a really good engagement and kills the Protoss army with good EMPs, and like we all know the scenario where the Protoss army just disappears and doesn't really kill too much, then the Terran of course is going to win the game, because he's going to push further, and with Stimpack he's very quick on the map, so he's going to kill Nexus by Nexus and reaching the production line. But yeah, if it's an even fight, then the Protoss will warp in quicker than the Terran, and then he should have an advantage. Against Zerg, I think there is no real death ball anymore, because the Broodlord Infestor is most of the time superior, especially if the Parasite hits the mothership. Then then the game is over right away. And yeah, I think this term death ball used to be true when there was like Void Ray Coloss against Zerg, and the Zergs didn't really know what to do. And back then, I think that even the numbers about the units were a bit different. Like the Coloss Void Ray were a bit stronger or something. So yeah, back then I think it was really hard to play against it, but there was only a very small period of time. But somehow the casters always keep telling about the death ball, and the community soak up that kind of information, so they write it in the forums and it just spreads everywhere. Yeah, but to be honest, there is no real death ball anymore, because Protoss unit composition changed a lot during StarCraft 2. You still, I mean, Stalker Coloss is still the core of the unit composition, but overall we do see way more units involved. We do see more War Prisms, a lot of DT Harris in the later stages, Mothership, even sometimes carriers being used. So yeah, I think the term is just not accurate anymore.
To refer back to the Night End thing about him saying like it was harder to differentiate between Protoss players because there was like almost a cap to the skill. I wondered if we could apply that to Zerg versus Zerg. I realise you're not a Zerg player, but just from what you've seen, because one of the problems of the era of the Zerg isn't just this idea that Zergs automatically beat every other race. It's the idea that when the Zerg players play each other, it does seem as though you can have some very funky results, like some players who should be a lot worse beating them. I mean, you even see when the top Koreans play each other, who are all Zergs, it's almost like a lottery as to who wins now. It's very hard to predict who's going to win these matches, even when they're the best players, like Life versus Leenock versus Violet versus... It's very hard to predict who's going to win these games. Do you think there's a degree to which maybe the problems with Zerg at the moment mean that like even when they play each other, it's hard for it to be a pure skill affair?
Yeah, but I don't think that's just the issue of the like the mirror match, ZVZ, and also PvP. I think there are just some coin flips and build order wins, and some players really love to do that kind of builds where you're gonna gamble in one direction, and if it works you're gonna win easy, and if it doesn't you're gonna look like a fool. And as long as there are many players who like to play like that, it's really hard to call the scores before, or to say, yeah, this guy is the favorite. Because there are very nice ZVZs and very nice PvPs, if both players going for the same kind of strategy, or like a kind of even strategy where it's Blink against Robo, or I think Mutalisk against Infestor at some point is very nice to watch as well. But yeah, of course, if someone is going for 6 spool and the other one is going for 15 hedge, and well, actually I heard that doesn't even work anymore, but you get my idea. If someone really wants to gamble a lot and he's picking the right strategy, he's gonna win pretty easy, and then it's not really a matter of skill, it's just a lot of luck and a lot of knowledge about your opponent, like knowing his play style, knowing his thinking of the game as well. So I think that's because many players like to play like this. If they can read their opponent very well, they're gonna try to exploit it, and that's also a sign of a good player. So it makes sense to play like that if it's a good possibility to win.
One of the reasons actually I like to talk to you about StarCraft 2 and interview you is because there's an interesting thing. Whenever I interview people and talk to them behind the scenes at events, I've noticed like there are very, very few players who are even close to like an objective perspective on their own race and their own play. Like a lot of players have very delusional ideas about how easy it is for their opponents if they're a different race and how hard it is for them. And in the same weekend, you can hear from someone how Zerg's totally overpowered, and some Zerg's telling you how, oh, an Immortal All-In never fails, and you know they're just Protoss abusers. You can hear the totally counter arguments that can't all exist at once. But I've actually noticed, it seems to me like you have a fairly objective view on things. But then at the same time, when I asked Zoki this similar question, because I thought the same about him, he said that he thinks part of it's just because Germans are more reserved in public, and that if I listened to Scenecast and I knew German, you're all just basically whining like cunts, sort of. So what I want to know is how much is it true, and do you think you do have sort of a even keel? Is you're not going too much into the bias?
Actually, I whine a lot as well, but sometimes if you discuss about the game and you want to be serious, then the whine doesn't help. I mean, then you have to talk, and you have to be objective about the game itself if you want to talk to someone about the balance. Because if you talk about the balance and someone is always whining and you can't really talk to him because he's going to say, yeah, just make stalkers or more stalkers, or I'm going to tell him to make more infestors, that doesn't really help. Yeah. So, to be honest, we have a Skype channel and there's a lot of whine as well when Soccer or me talking about some matchups. It always also depends on the latest results. Like if you just lost against Zerg, and then there's a discussion about Zerg, and then of course you're gonna be not too happy to read that someone says, yeah, everything is fine with Zerg and infestors are perfect. But overall, I think some players can talk about the game without being too whiny and being too much in favor of their own race, because they see the whole thing of StarCraft or of Warcraft 3 back then. And it's still hard to say, because we all get the money by playing StarCraft 2, so of course we want to have our race to be pretty good and the others to be a bit weaker. So I think it's really hard to listen to programmers sometimes when it's about balance. But as I said, I think some players actually are kind of serious, and they don't talk too much bullshit about the other races. They try to be serious, and they try to talk the truth about the balance and how they really feel. Because sometimes a player feels something just because it always happens to him, and then he gets a hint by someone who tries to help him, and then the feeling of the game changed because he got this kind of information, and then he's going to adapt his game style, and then it feels completely different. So sometimes it helps a lot to talk about the balance with other players and try to be serious instead of just telling him to make more infestors because they are good.
I mean, the reason I ask actually, what I was leading to, I'm trying to think how to phrase this politely. Okay, if we look at your career so far, you get to play EPS all the time. That's something constant. But most people would probably say you're like a mid-tier pro. I mean, you've never had like a super big score. You've never had a really, really deep run in a big tournament. You've had some good results at the medium-sized tournaments. So in terms of just being a pro, while I realize the competitive drive, it's fun to play, fun to compete. When I think about like your mind for the game, and I see you doing casting, etc., I think like, wouldn't that be a great fit for you? Like, wouldn't you like to do more casting and do big events? Like, you could, as an analytic caster, it seems like you'd be like a shoe-in for this because you have like more of an objective take. You know all the players very well. Wouldn't this be a good fit?
It is definitely a possibility for me in the future, but this year was actually very successful as a player. I think I'm like top 10 in the foreign earnings from tournament prize money winnings, so I can't really complain about this year. The year before was less successful for me, but I mean, even though I can't really, to be honest, I don't really think of myself that I'd be able to win the big tournaments like MLG or NASL or maybe even IEM. But there are smaller tournaments, and with like good European players, not Koreans. I think I can always make top 3 there if I have a good day or if I don't play too bad, which actually is kind of satisfying for me. And then of course the EPS is also very important for the German players. So overall I have to say this year was pretty good from the results. But being a caster, or like I have a lot of fun casting, I have to say. So that's a possibility. But right now, I don't really think about it too much because I enjoy playing a lot. And as I said, this year was good, so I'm gonna continue to be a pro gamer next year as well, and see how the numbers work out in the end. And but yeah, being a caster, yeah, I can think of doing that, but right now I don't need to because playing is still going pretty well. So.
Okay, do you have a final message for everyone who watched this? Anyone you want to say thank you to?
To my team, of course, Horse Sports, and sponsors and partners, and then to you for the interview. It was fun, and yeah, to all my supporters, my fans, to the players. I enjoy this tournament a lot because it's so much fun to be here in Krefeld, the Home Story Cup, and yeah, thanks for the interview.
Danke.
Danke.